Hello, Karl-Friedrich. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine, and you?
Very well, thank you. Lovely to see you. And first of all, congratulations on your 25th anniversary. It's quite a momentous occasion.
Good to see you as well, and yeah, thank you for the anniversary. Congratulations. In fact, we would have preferred to hold a different anniversary event, but for the moment we're still restricted. We postponed this to a later date in the year, or maybe even beginning of next year.
You know, at the same time, it seems as if everyone's spirits are starting to lift. You know, personally, I'll be able to get my second shot for my vaccination on May 2nd. And, you know, I'm already starting to think about being able to see great friends again, especially towards the end of summer, the beginning of fall.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see you and to congratulate you in person. In the context of when you first created L.U.C. With the launch of the caliber 1.96 in 1996, with the launch of one of my favorite watches of all time, the Chopard 1860 in 1997, looking back at this 25-year journey, this incredible adventure, what are some of your favorite moments and what do you derive some of the greatest reward from?
Well, I guess the all-time favorite moments were probably those where some of the timepieces that we created, some of the movements that we conceived, did their first tic-tac. You know, that is always what I call the champagne moment. When you work, 2, 3, 4, 5 years on a project, and you wind the movement, and everything works. This is always a magic moment. This was the case for 196, 25 years ago, and it was still the case with anything that followed, because there's so much work, passion that goes in, that the anticipation is great. And when finally you have the good news and you can touch the object that you have seen hundreds of times, maybe on the screen or in simulation, and God knows, today you can do all this in a digital way, but it doesn't replace this moment when you touch and feel the product. And that's precisely what we are all missing right now, the touch and feel.
I wanted to ask you about one quite extraordinary moment. I think there was a year where you found yourself on the jury of the Geneva Grand Prix, right? And you were there because your watch, a Ferdinand Berthoud watch, had won the year before. But then suddenly you found yourself in a position where you would have to judge your own watch, because your extraordinary full strike minute repeater, the world's first minute repeater with sapphire crystal gongs, was presented for the big prize. Can you tell me in that moment what went through your mind and what did you do?
Well, obviously I kind of felt out of place. I was, extremely happy that our full strike would made it so far, and that we are, in the running. And at the same time, I was saying that I can't possibly stay here to take part of any decision making or any discussion, because I'm somewhat biased, and everyone will, not everyone will understand. And so I kind of immediately decided that I had to retreat and let the others do their work, and obviously cross my fingers.
It was funny because Nick Falks had told me about this moment, and he said it was unprecedented because there was never a moment where there was someone who was on the jury because they'd won the year before for a different brand in this particular case, was in a position where he would have to judge his own watch. And he was curious as to what would happen. And he said, like the consummate gentleman that Karl-Friedrich is, before anyone could even say anything, you got up and excused yourself and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, as I had a small role in the watch you're about to judge, I think it would be best if I excuse myself." And he said, "You put it with such eloquence and charm and humility," and that's what he really liked about it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite anecdotes as well.
So can I ask you on the evening itself? So you had no idea who had won this prize, obviously, because even though you were on the jury, you had excused yourself from the voting. When the final prize was announced, the Aiguille d'Or, the great prize for the Geneva Grand Prix, and you found out that you had won for the full strike, making you the only person to have ever won 2 years in a row for 2 different brands, how did you feel in that moment?
Well, look, I was blown away. I was literally blown away and extremely happy and for everyone involved, because this a project like the Full Strike or the year before the Berthoud at the same level is a huge undertaking for a whole group of artisans and engineers and a whole team, and I felt so great for everyone, and of course I was overwhelmed because it was basically also the first Aiguille d'Or for Chopard, tout court, as we say in French. So it was amazing.
It's extraordinary to me, and again, I had this conversation with Nick. We were both remarking on the fact that anytime you have the possibility to do something, you always do it with the greatest authenticity. And sometimes that even means being a pioneer. Sometimes that even means doing something for the very first time. For example, making minute repeater gongs out of sapphire crystal. What is it within you that makes you feel compelled to take sometimes the more difficult route and to go the most authentic way possible?
Well, I think in the very beginning, the first, and I want to go back to the first movement that we conceived, the 196. The first, I guess the first discussions we had, I said, we are not here to make just another automatic movement. We are here to make a most interesting version of a totally new automatic movement. And I would like you to think that way. And then we came up with the combination that we came up with, meaning we stacked 2 barrels, connected them, and connected this to a micro rotor in terms of power production, if you wish. And the whole thing had to be Geneva seal and so on and so forth. So it was already then, it was an undertaking that was based on this philosophy. We respect all the, of course, the watchmaking techniques and all the watchmaking knowledge that is available, but we do something innovative with it, try to bring in a different solution and not take the easy road. Yes, it had to make sense. That's the last thing I need to say. It's not making it difficult just for the sake of making it difficult. It has to make sense, and there has to be an added technical value. The added technical value inevitably always had to lead to more precision. So because we said everything has to be chronometer certified, otherwise we don't even talk about it.
And 4 Hertz, which was also, as I recall you saying, was a big step towards chronometer certification for all the watches. It's really interesting because I remember you telling me that you wanted to do micro rotor because it was the most elegant solution for an automatic watch, and it would allow you to create a watch that was relatively small in dimension. But I love the idea that you combine that with twin barrels. And then also insisted on bidirectional winding for the micro rotor as well, which, as I recall, was a massive headache initially, you know, and mounting it finally on ceramic ball bearings. I mean, at some point, someone must have just told you, Karl-Friedrich, let's just make it unidirectional or what, and you insisted to make sure that it was bidirectional because you wanted to make it efficient.
Yes. And I don't take no for an answer. Well, many times.
Yeah, I love that because, and I also love the fact that the very first movement you ever made was both Geneva Seal and cost certified. So you had immediately the highest certification at the time until you created Qualité Fleurier for chronometer certification, and the highest certificate also for the level of finish as well. So, you know, again, authenticity that existed already from the beginning and has followed us all the way through.
Exactly.
So on the occasion of your 25th anniversary, I'd love to speak to you about some of the watches that I have in front of me, and I know some of the watches that you have in front of you as well. The first one would be this very beautiful Spirit 25 Quattro, so 4-barreled watch with a Grand Feu enamel dial and a jump hour indication. Could you please tell us a little bit about this timepiece and why you decided to make this as a celebration of your 25th anniversary?
This watch, the jumping hour mechanism always was one of my favorite mechanisms or ways to show time, because it's kind of, it gives this Zen feeling to the dial. There is just one hand and just a little window, and the rest is hidden away, and it was something that I always wanted to come up with. And in a way, this watch was, or this movement was always paying the price of being put on the side because we had, you know, other, probably more important things to do. But I insisted finally that for the 25th anniversary, this watch had to be ready. And I find the combination with very important caliber, the Quattro, you just wind once a week. It's still a totally unique concept today. The enamel dial, I think everything fell into place at one point. We said, this is it. This is one of our anniversary pieces we have to do. And it's been in the making for the past 5 years, but for the past 2 years, we really went for it, and it's one of my favorite pieces. As a result, it's really timeless. It has this Zen feeling to it. I love it.
So I love what you told me in terms of the beauty of its design. I love what you said also about it being sort of Zen-like. So a lot of times watches with hands sort of remind us of the constant passing of time. But in the context of a jump hour watch, you get to feel very calm and tranquil as you see the hours stay in place for the majority of the 59 minutes, right? But I love also the fact that you use the Quattro movement as its base, because I also happen to know that even with 196 hours of power reserve, I know you actually have even more power in the barrels should you wish, but you intentionally cut off this power reserve because you want that power to always maintain a very high and consistent level of torque. And for me, the logic, therefore, to have a watch with 4 barrels powering a jump hour indication, which consumes a little bit of energy every time it has to make its jump, but because you have such great power delivery, it's not affected by that. This, I'm sure, came into your mind also because I know you always do things from a very horological and logical perspective too.
Yeah, indeed. But one detail I need to mention also is the position of the window. Because at first the team showed me the position at 12. I said, look, the hand inevitably hides the perfect moment because the hand would be at 12 and the hour would jump and you wouldn't even see it. So I sent them back to the drawing board said we need to have this window at 6 o'clock.
One of my favorite details about the watch is related to the window at 6 o'clock. So I love the fact that you said you didn't want it to be obscured by the hand as it crossed the 60-minute threshold. But I also love the fact that all Grand Feu enamel dials are made on top of a base of solid gold, right? And so here, what you've actually done is you actually high polish and angled just the frame around the jump hour as well, which a lot of people would never even think to do. A lot of times it would just be a flat, and square aperture. Here you actually did Anglage for this window as well. And this, I think, is an amazing tribute to your eye for detail.
Yeah, and it was an amazing challenge too, to do it. I'm glad you noticed it.
It was the first thing I noticed, actually, and I was like, this is only Karl-Friedrich would make a watch like this, because I'm sure also for the person that's been told to make Anglage on a piece of enamel, which is, very fragile, I'm sure his hands were trembling to some degree as well. So I love that. So if I could ask you a little bit, we talked a little bit about 1996 and when you launched a caliber 1.96 and you insisted on cost certification. But several years later, you would launch a certification called Qualité Fleurier. Tell me a little bit about why you want to achieve this, which I consider to be the highest level of quality certification in the watch industry, and incidentally is testing complete watches and not just movements as Cost was doing, which, okay, to be fair, some people are doing now, but you were the first one to do this. Why that was such an important thing for you as well, before I ask you about this amazing steel Qualité Fleurier watch that you've created.
At one point, you could say similar minds met. I sat with Michel Parmigiani, and we were discussing certifications, and we both said at the same time, there is no certification that combines the aesthetics and the precision and the testing in real life situations. And this was the factor that determined our subsequent action of founding the Qualité Fleurier Foundation, creating the foundation, and establishing all the rules and regulations, if you wish. But most of all, commissioning this incredible aperture, which can test a watch over 24 hours or more, simulating natural movements that a person would do during the course of a day. And when we commissioned this machine, and people started hearing about it, they would kind of look at us, what are they doing? There are enough certifications around, but we insisted that this is not this final Fleury test, as we call it, really is creating added value, and most of all also added testing value, because we, on a daily basis almost, we test new movements on Fleury test, and we can really anticipate problems which you may not otherwise find. So basically, it was a bit of a revolution. Most of all, because this was coming out of little Fleurier, not so well known in in the big watchmaking circles at the time. And I think it's still unequal today in a way, in terms of combining so many tests and levels of certifications.
I hear people are terrified of the idea of putting their watches through that certification process. So daunting is it? But I love the idea that you've also made a tribute to the Qualité Fleurier, and this for the first time in a steel watch, which I have to say is one of the most beautiful watches of the year. It's absolutely stunning.
I agree with you.
I love the design. I love the subtle sun ray effect of the central part of the dial with this beautiful sort of sector ring that's going around it in blue. And I love also the use of these signature Chopard L.U.C. Markers or indexes,
Yes.
which are even present on the very original watch from 1997. Tell us about this watch. And incidentally, I hear you have now a huge problem with this watch because apparently there was someone in Singapore who wanted to buy all 25 pieces himself. So you now have are faced with an allocation issue, from what I understand.
We do have an allocation issue. I agree. But first of all, the case is really based on an L.U.C. L.U. Chopard case going back to the 1950s. So that's the historic part of the watch. And again, I always wanted to propose a Qualité Fleurier watch in steel. The occasion never arose, and I said, finally, for the 25th anniversary, again, this is something that really makes sense and really will appeal to collectors. And I was not really wrong, because we do have a problem with allocating the watch now. Only 25 pieces are made. So, well, I received a few phone calls, I admit.
It's fantastic. And I love that you selected this wonderful calf strap on this watch as well. It somehow fits the character of it perfectly.
Yes.
Let's go from there to when I have the hope once again to travel. And I was thinking that the perfect watch to wear is a wonderful watch you created for this year called the Time Traveler 1 Black.
Yes.
Which is taking your iconic world time watch, but now giving it to us in ceramized titanium. Tell us a little bit about this watch, sir.
Well, again, it's something that was in my head since quite some time, but our teams, the marketing teams and so on, they insisted that we can't present too many novelties too fast, too quickly, but I'm very fond of black watches myself, and I think this is the perfect candidate to kind of present a monochrome, a more sporty version of the world time. That is a very interesting watch in itself. But if I had to make a choice today, which one to choose, this is the one I would wear. And this is probably the one I will personally wear hopefully soon, when I will hopefully again travel.
Absolutely.
And I like the fact that the dial is very readable, nevertheless, because I think these watches have a purpose. You have to be able to tell time in the other parts of the world, and I think it's the best possible compromise we could find between the size of the dial, the readability, and the monochrome approach. But we probably made about 10 different dials before we came up with this one.
I love the watch, and I love what you were saying also in terms of readability, because as a guy that's getting a little bit older, my eyes are not as what they used to be. And I have to say the legibility on that watch is fantastic. I also love that even in the context of a smaller dial, because you've got, of course, the world time indications around the main dial, you've incorporated these signature indexes from L.U.C. as well. And I love that how that theme carries over from one watch to the next as well. Tell me about ceramized titanium. Why did you decide on this?
I think it's a material that where the finish comes through very well. The matte finish. I think is very fitting for this watch, which I wanted to have a much more sporty appeal. I think this is the best material to use to give it that sporty appeal, and I love the overall appearance of this watch, and we also tinted the glass in the back, so
nice.
Just another little detail that I like. My son called me up when he first saw it on Instagram because he hadn't seen it anywhere before. And he wrote to me that this is really a cool watch. So I think I hit the right chord, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we appeal to the younger generation.
Absolutely. You know, I think you actually have quite a lot of watches now that really appeal to the younger generation. That is an amazing one as well. If you look also at the Alpine Eagle and its adoption by the younger generation. So there's a very strong kind of link between our generation and the next generation as well. How important is it for you to have your son be able to give you that kind of feedback?
I think it's very reassuring in that respect. But it's also sometimes challenging in other respects, because, you know, if he has the feeling that this is not really what we should be doing, he will also tell me, which I appreciate. I think it's important, because at the end of the day, you know, we have to always project ourselves into the future, and the future is also his generation, obviously.
100% agree. And I know in the past we've had conversations about also you being one of the first watch brands to really incorporate ethics into what you do, whether it's ethically sourced gold, whether it's, I think you were the first one in the world to have a recycled steel watch. And I know that generation really respects you for that. On the subject of titanium, tell me a little bit about this beautiful perpetual calendar chronograph that you've made in polished titanium.
I think perpetual calendar chronograph is what you consider already a serious complication. But I thought it's important for once not to make it look so serious, to make it look more casual, more sporty, but still retaining its elegance. So again, we went for a bit of a monochrome appearance, where the blue part of the sky would come out, and we used what I would call the traditional markers that are part of the L.U.C. history today, in a way. And I think the movement is very well highlighted by the surrounding matte finish. So you would really focus on the movement, which is beautiful. I mean, the chronograph without the automatic winding is stunningly, it looks so stunning. This is the way I prefer it. And therefore, I think this version really expresses again kind of a more contemporary approach, a younger approach, but it still retains, I think, the seriousness of the subject, because, you know, we're talking about an important complication.
It's fantastic. I love the execution. And it's genuinely, like, it's a very technical watch, but it's super engaging and sporty and even fun, which I think is great.
Yes. And the value that I mean, I don't know, you don't have this one in front of you, I guess.
Unfortunately not, no.
Yeah, but because I can tell you without the feel factor that it's very light and very comfortable to wear. Because before we had several versions in rose gold, white gold, and so on. Obviously heavier, and this is very comfortable to wear.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it's we're making it difficult this year to make a choice, I think.
And I know the year is not over for you yet as well. So, but I have to say, it's one of the strongest years for any brand I've seen. You know, you've done an amazing job across the board.
Yes, the year is not over, and what I can tell you is that there may be further surprises later on this year, maybe much later on this year.
If I can ask you a question about, so in 2019, I had the great pleasure of being invited to a wonderful vineyard in Bergerac, Chateau Montessier-le-Tour, which happens to be your vineyard, which I also have to say, I really admire the fact that upon taking the reins of this vineyard, you immediately made it biodynamic, which was, I can only imagine, a significant challenge. So while we were in the vineyard, we had also the opportunity to look at some watches that you had just created. And one of them was a watch that you called the Flying T. And when I looked at this watch, I was absolutely blown away. Here was a Flying Tourbillon, automatic, cost certified Geneva seal. And I thought it was such an extraordinary watch. And then when I turned the watch over, I felt this almost eureka sense of nostalgia, because I looked at the movement and it looked somehow familiar. And it reminded me of the very first movement you ever created, the caliber 1.96. And I remember I was looking at it in just awe. And I think you walked by and said, "Wade, do you like this watch?" And I said, "This watch is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen." And I love the fact that this movement reminds me of the caliber 1.96. And I think you told me, well, actually it's based on the 1.96 caliber. So I remember having a conversation with you, asking you, would it then therefore be possible for this movement to be placed inside of a case that was the same size and same dimension as the very original Chopard 1860 watch you launched in 1997, which was 36.5 mm in diameter and 7.2 mm in thickness? And you said, "I believe that might be possible." Does that idea sound appealing to you, sir?
Well, I think it's most appealing, and I think it's definitely something we should entertain further.
I think it could be very interesting, and
right.
I think it's remarkable, because if you were to create that watch, it would be the first Flying Tourbillon cost certified watch that is also Geneva sealed, and in a way demonstrates that you have the capacity not just to make movements that are on a larger side, but also to make extraordinary movements in a very wearable size as well. And especially if you look at it from a perspective of vintage watches, the size of watches from like the 40s or the 50s or even the 60s, that would be something quite remarkable.
Well, and we will both agree that the trend and tendency is towards smaller watches. So I'm very happy that we have such a beautiful movement at our disposal, and now with a tourbillon, combined with the tourbillon, we'll be able to make something, rather small to wear, and this is definitely something we will be looking at.
Brilliant. I think it would be the ultimate expression of watchmaking ability plus the ultimate expression of elegance, which is when I think about you, sir, that I think you encompass both of those wonderful qualities.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased about your remarks, of course, but I always have to remind everyone that whatever we managed to achieve, it was not done by myself. It was done with a great team behind me and at my side, and a lot of encouragement also from my family, which I think is always very important when you enter unknown territory, which we did 25 years ago with a totally new manufacture.
Absolutely. And I think it's made such a critical difference, I would imagine, now looking back 25 years later, where if you are in fact a watch brand that does not have in-house ability, you're not really a true manufacturer / maison. And you certainly are one of those.
Yes, and you have a serious issue with independence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Correct. And you are indeed completely self-reliant as well. So that's wonderful. Mm. And it gives you the ability to make the watches that make us dream. Karl-Friedrich, it has been a pleasure
spending time with you, sir.
Thank you so much. And congratulations on your anniversary. Bravo,
and
sir.
I look forward to see you again soon in person.
It will be my pleasure.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Bye.